We need to talk about the SP 500 and the Nasdaq 100, but before we can get into that content, we need to talk about exactly what was said specifically by the Fed today. Now, it's important to know there's a few key things happening this week. We have the Fed, specifically Powell, talking on Wednesday. We have PCE data on Thursday. That's going to be the biggest area of news for the rest of the week. I want to highlight that. I want everyone to know that. Just going forward, understand and know that. I'll probably remind you every day so you don't have to worry too much. But let's talk about what Fed Bullard said on the day. So there's a few different articles and he highlights a few different things. First of all, ways to go on interest rates, which I don't want to talk too much about that. But I do want to say one thing right here that he did say, and it's not in this other article, but I want to highlight from Bloomberg. Fed Bullard says the markets are underestimating chances of higher rates. So just want to highlight that. And he doesn't mean raising rates to like one whole point. He's talking about overall just continuing the rise. And if you haven't watched it yet, I recommend watching the video I posted yesterday, which was on Sunday, basically titled Black Swan. And it's kind of how this could really collapse the market. And I wanted people to understand that viewpoint. So if you haven't watched it, it's a really good watch and it goes over the real big dangers. A lot of stuff I talk about here, it's more shorter dated from Monday through Friday because it's more of a day trading show for you guys. But I want y'all to understand just a longer term viewpoint. Some people think, oh, well, Tyler's turning, bullish and he's looking at the market to just keep running up. No, that's not what I'm looking at, right? I keep saying long term, I think we're going to have stagflation and sideways movement. But going into the market, I do understand and expect upside movement on the market. So we're gonna go to some trades I was talking about and everything else, but let's talk about this. This is what had my attention with what he said. Fed will likely need to keep interest rates above 5% into 2024. Now, talking about this, it's important because we know there's not going to be any cuts until 2024, but he goes on to say that they're trying to get this to the low end of 5 to 7%, which would lead us to like the 6% range on interest rates, and that'd be bad. That's hefty amounts. So if you watch the video going on from yesterday, then it really goes more into detail of how this really could play out. They're probably going to do a 50 point coming into December, which will be taken out of context as bullish. Again, it's not a pivot. You don't understand. Them lowering the size of the rates does not mean they're pivoting. A pivot would be at least a stall or at least starting to cut. That's a pivot because then you're trading or changing what you're doing. But right now, if they continue to raise rates, even if it's by 0.25, they are not pivoting. They are still on the aggressive side of things. You have to understand that. So no matter what they raise it to, it's still not a pivot. So that's why I've been really clear about. I just want to make sure it's clear here. So he goes on a little bit further and talking about the big dangers. I think we'll have to stay there all during 2023 and into 2024, told Market Watch editor Greg Robb. Again, which I said before, 5 to 7% range. This is the part of stagflation that will become an issue. And the big thing about this, if we stay at this range of 5 to 7%, which we most likely will, then the question is when do they stop raising rates? If energy prices start to soar, and they're already talking about the price cap going on with Russia, and that will directly impact inflation going down the road. Because I'm telling you, we can't just keep releasing strategic reserves, get a lot of problems on the horizon, okay? You have to understand that. But short term, I'm telling you, going into this next Fed meeting, PCE, if it comes out good, I am telling you, you're going to have a little bit of upside. Again, stay with me. We have short-term, long-term. There's a big difference. I know this can be a little bit confusing to follow along, but we're going to get there. Now, before we get into the charts, I have to ask you to consider doing two things: liking and subscribing. Every single day, I'm posting videos for you so you can be prepared. You'll always know what's happening, my expectations, and where we're going. And when you come here, it's unbiased. I post the winners and I post the losers. So let's get back into the content. So first thing I want to talk about is VIX. And I definitely think it's a little bit out of context for me to talk about VIX of the all charts first. Now, what I talked about going into, I think it was actually yesterday or maybe even Friday's video. I'm not really sure what day it was. Anyways, coming into this, big point was I expected us to come down a little bit deeper to 19 to 18. We did not, and we got to bounce out of the gate. I did highlight this is an overall big area you're kind of getting into, but I still would like to see VIX drop more. And I think there's still the possibility that VIX does drop more. And again, like I said, right, we have the short-term viewpoint, but there's all the key signs going into the Fed meeting that could signal for a big drop, right? We have to anticipate that. What are those factors and signs? We have VIX coming back down to the big area, which we've been balancing at. Worth mentioning. Going into the dollar, DXY, been a great indicator. Dollar has been tanking, has been dropping. Now, you are getting somewhat of a double bottom, but it's not confirmed until you break back above 108. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you break this as a true double bottom and start pushing above 108, 0.05, I believe, you're going to get some nasty downside movement on the market. But this is going to be a big signal. I'm actually going to set an alert right now so you can all see this, just so everyone knows. So we have an alert set right there. Whenever we break that, we'll know. So that's going to be a big aspect to look at. So these signals are definitely setting up. Now, I don't believe this is clear to just start shooting up and get downside of the market. I just want to let people know where we're at and how we're moving. Now, you could have some downside potential with Powell talking on Wednesday, but I can't predict or tell you what Powell's going to say. Now, when we go over to indexes, this is what I'm going to talk about. Now, today in Discord, I didn't take any trades, but I did follow what Jay posted. So this morning, I'm going to highlight. I always show you guys what trades were taken, getting in and out of. Now, Jay's took the QQQ puts 12/12 December 279s, guiding at 304. Those contracts ended up running to $4. He moved his stops up. He's leaving a few runners. I ended up cutting all mine just because I was happy. But I'm going to tell you why I cut mine, because there's a lot of indecision on the market today. And overall going into Wednesday is, I think, when we're going to start seeing the indecision go away. Because when we're looking specifically here, when we look at what's happening with Qs, it's the weakest of the week. We've been talking about that. You understand that. You know what I'm talking about here, right? So when we look, let's look at the indexes first, right? We're going to go to ES just real quick. So ES, it was holding up, making those higher lows, which you talked about. You did break those today. And then look at NQ. In comparison, NQ was already getting hit. You were kind of making higher lows, but you were still already getting hit, right? Since the 25th, you've been kind of dropping, right? You were already dropping prematurely compared to the ES and the Dow. So when I'm looking to go short on anything, I want to favor the Qs over SPY and over Dow. And that's what we originally did way back when we get the CPI data that kind of tanked us last time. Remember? That's what we traded before the last meeting. So the Qs were the way to go last time, and they performed just as well this time. So I still like this. I'm out of that position. But going into this, I could see us just chopping around here. Nothing really breaking by any means yet. Now, if we look at Qs, I want to talk about the specific range you're in. You can see here. Now, this is our clear range 1, 2, which is basically the 290 down to the 281, 280 range, right? And you're pinballing back and forth basically since November 14th, about 2 weeks, right? And if we look at how this behavior is forming, it's clear. And I'm not going to say we're going to get a bounce tomorrow, but it would not surprise me, right? Because in tangent with this, when we look at volume specifically on SPY, it's trash. It's utter garbage. Let me refresh it. Yeah. So in comparison to last week, you're actually lower than 2 out of the 4 days you had, right? And last week was a holiday week, and this is a normal week. Big cause for concern, volume being this trash. It's not going to stay this way. When volume kicks in, that's when we're going to get confirmation, right? And that's the problem why I got out of my position, is because you came down into the supply. You can come to the 1 and 2 hour and see this was your clear-cut supply down here, or demand, sorry, and you started to bounce. So I just got out of my position at $4. Now, going into this, if you break below this level on Qs, I mean, it gets ugly. You start to break down, that could be the big problem. But I want to say this, right? I was coming into this week expecting some upside. And again, I was very much expecting that from this morning until we got rejected and sellers started to step in. The going thing that would have us bullish was breaking over 403. We couldn't do it, okay? When you come with a supply and demand viewpoint, you have to have key levels to be watching. And if you're at supply, you're bearish until you can break over, right? So that's where we were. That was the problem we could never really get over. And, you know, we ended up tanking back down to the bottom of this range, 395. What did I say would happen if you broke below 400? You'd come right back down to 395, and that's where you're at. You're just pinballing in this range. I don't think you're neither bearish nor bullish here right now. You're just stuck and range bound here, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Now, if SPY starts to break below local lows around the 390 range, 390.5 roughly, then we can talk about being bearish. That would be bad news bears. But I just don't think you're going to get that deep downside move, at least until Powell talks on Wednesday, and then most of all until PCE. PCE is going to dictate how we move, because again, even though they said all the stuff they said today with the Fed, the bullet point that they made known is that what the Fed is doing is relying on data. They aren't making decisions prior to the meeting. They get data and then they make their decision, right? So far, PPI, CPI, PCE is up next. I'm telling you, this is going to be big, right? We got to get unemployment to rise, but They're not going to just keep spiking rates at 75 basis points. They're not going to keep doing that, people, okay? Especially if CPI and PPI are doing what they're doing. So what do I expect? I expect chop probably range bound in this range, most likely. You could break down from 395 down to 390. I don't see a break of 390 coming before Wednesday or Thursday. I really just don't think Powell's going to tank the market personally, but you have to understand Powell is going to be a big dictator when it comes to the way we're going to move. So that's more of a coin toss, but the biggest thing this week, in my opinion, is going to be PCE. Powell and the rest of the Fed has said PCE is the biggest determining factor on inflation and the best reader of what's really happening. That's their words, not mine. I like CPI the most, but we got to listen to what Powell says because he's the one that's making all these decisions. Okay. So when we get in here a little bit deeper, I want to talk about a few charts we are looking at and a little bit of cause for concern that I'm having. Now today, we started seeing some pretty bad downside. For instance, Apple, you started breaking down. This was gross. Now, when we come to Apple, let me get rid of that really quick. I'm going to go to the weekly time frame. Again, this is probably my favorite chart that there is right now. Apple on the weekly. You've been making higher lows essentially since September 2020, grinding up. Okay. You've been sitting in this pennant for a little bit of time also since you made your all-time highs in December. So this is basically a year-long little pennant going on now. Now, if you look at what's happening, you're probably going to come down and test the 138 level. I don't know how long, but I'm looking for that level to be tested soon enough, right? Now, if you break below this is going to be one of the biggest indicators on the market, in my opinion. If Apple breaks this trend, you have a lot of room to fall, people. And that's where things could get ugly. When Apple starts to move, and today Apple is one of the most bearish days it's had in a hot minute, I'm going to tell you right now, if Apple starts to lose it, I believe SPY will just get its legs cleaned from underneath it. So Apple's going to be a big thing to watch. Again, not a day trading perspective, but just food for thought here. On shorter time frames, it doesn't look necessarily... It does look pretty bad. You flip that key level about 145 roughly, and you just press to the downside. Going on a little bit further, we can look at something like, actually I want to look at Meta. Meta looks also quite disgusting. You're making a descending triangle and then you end up breaking that little bit of a low that you had down here. This is something that we've been looking at for some time here also. So I want to see if you get continuation and stay below 109. If you stay below 109, a few levels I'm going to be watching, you have a little bit of a demand in this area on like the 4-hour time frame right here, 104 to 103. But I do believe there's a possibility you come and fill the daily gap all the way down to 98 and possibly all the way down to the daily gap down here at 91.4. You have two major daily gaps on Meta. It's definitely moved up on the watch list to the top short selling stocks that I'll be looking at. Puts on Meta could definitely print a lot. Now, I want to talk about Tesla also. Tesla, you know, we bought calls down here. That was the big move. We got a big move going up. Now, what did I say? Again, if you go and you look at what's happening with Tesla, again, I've been saying it for a while, the big area that I was watching for specifically on Tesla was about the 187, 188 range, right? I remembered it. I put it down for you guys. You go watch the previous video. You came right into supply and got rejected. And not only did you get rejected, if you go to something like the 15-minute chart, you got a double top here. Pretty gross. Boom, down, broke below. Rest was history. And I've been telling you guys, if you're looking to trade double bottoms, double tops, what do you look for? Now, obviously, the higher the time frame, the better. But what you were looking for here was pretty simple. So we'll go here, and I'll just highlight right here so you can see really quick. Now, some would call it a neckline or whatever you want to. I don't really care what you call it, just for time's sake. But we'll just go right here. You can see. So really, what you're looking at is that bottom right here, that swing low. You hit, pop, swing low there. You can actually see it times out perfectly with previous high you had at 186.35. And then look, you come, you break down, push back up, hold below, retest, and then boom, you lose it. All your legs are gone. I still have 3 runners on Tesla. I've got rid of most of my positions. Stop start break even on the remaining ones I have. But I do want to say, you're looking like you possibly might be getting rejected and reversing back to the downside. I'm okay admitting when we're not getting continuation or the trade's turned, okay? But when we look at this trade, I still made money. I managed my risk here, and I still have potential to make more with leaving a few runners. Again, stop, start, break even, so my risk is definitely capped here. I'm not going to lose money on this trade. Now, going into what's happening with my favorite short play that there is, right? I love Meta, but Coinbase has got to be my favorite one. Now, Coinbase, I definitely want people to understand that you're not really getting any good movement here. Now, when we look at Coinbase, probably one of my last stocks I'll talk about here. This level right here, 44.5 is huge. You did get a push and then a rejection here. Now you love that. So you've been retesting this range and getting rejected. I still think Coinbase is one of the weakest stocks on the market. Despite seeing any strength on the market, you always have been held down in comparison to the rest. So I believe Coinbase pretty soon is going to break the $40 range. Personal opinion. Do whatever you want with it. But I think Coinbase has some bad downside here. I do think it's going to, seep a little bit deeper. I think Bitcoin has not found its bottom, and I think we're going to start dropping more. BlockFi announced today that they are filing for bankruptcy, and I think this will negatively affect Coinbase, okay? I'm just going to tell you, this is putting fear in the market, and we could see some mass liquidations across the board on some people and trying to pull out of their accounts altogether because they're scared of what's happening here. So this is a giant cause for concern. If the market starts to take a hit, I think Coinbase will be one of the biggest stocks to be hit on the downside potential. So again, top stocks I'm looking at for downside potential, Coinbase really, but it's more of a dated position. I don't think it's going to play out overnight by any means. And then Meta, this thing could easily start just tanking overnight. So I want people to understand that. But I do believe if Meta can hold below 109, you're trying to see like on the hourly, maybe the 2-hour chart also, then I think you're going to test a 104, possibly filling that daily gap all the way down to $97, $98. There's a lot of stocks out here. We have some good plays coming up, but the biggest thing we want to see too is volume, people. Once we start seeing volume, that's when we'll get the confirmation and the direction we want to see. When we started getting confirmation to get upside, what happened? We had our biggest volume day right here, 140 million. Guess what? From that day, we continue to push on highs, right? Highs, pushing up. Guess what? We're going to probably get a pivot day soon for the downside. So I just want people to understand that, be aware of that, understand what we expect going forward. Just be careful. Again, you can even see on the downside push here, what happened? 120 million right here. You started pushing at your close at 374 and you pushed down and kind of had chop and you got confirmation back to the upside. So again, volume is the biggest decider when it comes to the market. And when we don't have volume, it becomes difficult to trade, specifically for me, because I am supply and demand and volume based type of trader. So again, I will see you tomorrow. Make sure you like and subscribe.